with that, I want to lay down the next layer of foundation of looking at some of the specifics of my chart. So I fully understand, and I want to lay this in here so that you can look in your unique situation that like Saturn is not the only planet making transits on my natal chart. So like while I'm having my Saturn return, there are also other things happening. And for me, there were a couple specific things happening, mostly to do with Pluto, which rules transformation, like caterpillar to butterfly style transformation. That's what we're talking about with Pluto. The old no longer exists and the new comes out of the cocoon after the old has melted down into gel. Reforms as something new and it moves forward for another life phase. And that is what Pluto does. So if you look at my chart while the Saturn return was exacting, you'll see that I also had Pluto transiting my midheaven. Midheaven is our soul's work, it's our vocation, it's how we show up in the world and like what we want to be remembered for. And Pluto ruling transformation was like literally sitting on top of my midheaven at the time of my Saturn return. So that is one thing. Saturn also is the ruler of my midheaven in my 10th house, since that falls in Capricorn. While Pluto was transforming my midheaven, Saturn was also doing its thing where it brought me a big dose of consequences, and that you'll see at the beginning it was a lot rougher than once I got into it and I got headed in the right direction. It was magical. Also at that same time, my natal Pluto, which is in Scorpio, had Jupiter, the moon, and Mars all sitting right on top of my natal Pluto while my Saturn return was exacting. So there was a lot going on in the cosmos at that time. I found the same thing for my Chiron opposition that I looked into briefly. But anyways, it's like there's always more than just one thing going on, which is also going to add flavor to your unique Saturn return. Like mine had so much to do with my Pluto in the 7th house, which is all about our like partnerships. And so taking on a new business partner during that time and then having growth around that relationship all throughout that experience. So that made a lot of sense. The fact that my midheaven was included and that the whole thing turned into a giant renovation of my career space, that made a lot of sense. My Saturn's in the 9th house. I had a spiritual awakening. That makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of different pieces that I feel like may or may not be unique to my unique Saturn placement in my chart and the other transits that happen to be going on at that time. I just want to make sure I'm giving a little bit of space to that so that it doesn't sound like Saturn return automatically equals your career getting an overhaul and you having a spiritual awakening. Those things are not guaranteed. That just fits really specifically with the 9th house and my midheaven both being included in this transit for me. And the last piece I want to bring in is what degree is your natal Saturn at? So like my natal Saturn is at 29 degrees, almost on into the next sign. It's just barely at the end of Sagittarius, right there with my Uranus. And so for me, I started to feel, like we'll see when we get to the timeline, I started to feel the ingress of Saturn immediately into Sagittarius. You'll see it's so like, how do you even make this shit up? You can't. So as soon as it stepped in, which was a solid 2.5 years before my Saturn return perfected, I was having the ripple effects of this. I was having the shock of like the wake up call, the reality check. Like, are you following your recipe or somebody else's? Because I think you're following somebody else's and it doesn't look like it's working for you, but you don't seem to be admitting that. So here, let me help you admit that. And that was basically the first chapter of my Saturn return. And then I guess one more thing I want to bring in here. How many last things can there be? Like another thing. The other thing I want to bring in here is this table that often appears when you pull your natal chart. And I mostly want to show you this so that you can see how dominantly leaning my mutable energy is. It's like all of what I am. Not really. I have some other, you see, I have like then a decent chunk of fixed energy. So that really does ground me back into myself. And when you look across, like the only element where I have all three of their signs included is Earth. So again, that is another grounding force for me as a person. But my dominant mode is mutability. which basically another word for that is adaptability, changeability, plasticity. I'm very open to what is life showing me and how does that update who I want to be and how I want to live and all of that. I also have an open identity center, so I try on identities like tops and I put it on and I'm like, nope, that's itchy, take it back off. Just because why not? And so I wanted to put that in there as another level of our foundation to say that my dominant approach in life and in my Saturn return is to jump off the cliff and ask questions later. It's like I can figure stuff out as I go. I'm like the cat who always lands on its feet. One of my theories going into my Saturn return, just as an example, is that I can learn anything. That was as far as I was early in my process of kind of waking up inside of myself. And one of the things I realized was that I'm really good at learning stuff, where other people seem to really kind of have to work to integrate new information into their system. I soak it up like a sponge so fast, so effortless. I think one of my superpowers might be learning. I think I can learn pretty much anything. And then I manifest my Saturn return experience, which has me open a grocery store with no grocery store experience. So the whole entire thing was a crash course in learning how grocery stores work fast enough to be able to build one and then run it once it was open. So yeah, that was obviously putting this theory that I had about myself, which was that I think one of my superpowers is learning. I think I'm really good at it. That's how I was back then. And then I manifest this experience, this initiation, where I prove to myself that that is not only true, but it's rock solid, that you can take that check to the bank. I can learn anything I put my mind to. I just point my focus there and it absorbs into my system. That's how my energy works. It's one of my superpowers. I can't throw a ball at a target to save my life. I fall down walking straight on smooth ground, no athletic ability to be found anywhere in these parts, but I can learn like a sponge. And my Saturn return proved that to me. It proved my own superpower to me. Again, that's where does self-trust come from? Where does self-reliance come from? It comes from seeing yourself in action and being pleased by the performance. And all that takes so often is showing up and having the humility to say that I may not know everything I need to know yet, but I can learn as I go. And so I've seen very, very, very few charts where there's no mutable energy. Almost all of us have at least some mutable energy in our chart, and that really is that ability to be open to change and adaptation and being able to learn as you go, to kind of fill in the gaps around. Like I said, you've done bits and pieces of everything that you're going to have to do, but you've never strung it all together in that way to apply these skills to this task. And there will be some learning included. That's part of that initiation of going from childhood to adulthood.